Hey everybody, welcome to the Mark Parham podcast. You can follow me online by going to Apple and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts and type in Mark Parham podcast and I should pop up. So I'm thinking about Tim Walz and this whole scandal of fraud and all this other stuff that's happening in Minnesota, allegedly. I have to say that just because. But anyway, I'm looking at this big scandal in Minnesota that was exposed by, I think his name is Nick Shirley. And, now when I sit back, I'm starting to connect the dots. And what I'm saying by that is Kamala Harris, remember she chose Tim Walz as the vice president, her vice president, pick after the day when she was running for president. And it all makes sense now because Kamala Harris, even though she would, come on TV and act like she was concerned about the border and all this other stuff, how basically the Biden administration was just, letting folks come across the border like it was nothing. And then you have Tim Walz who, you see how basically with the situation happening in Minnesota, you see how some of those immigrants and stuff that live in that state are, treated better than Americans, if you think about it. And if you look at both politicians are for open borders, and they're basically two people that want tons of illegal immigrants to come into America. I mean, if you really think about it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you look at the choice to choose Tim Walz, I mean, Kamala Harris could have chosen anybody else, but all of a sudden she chose somebody who, it didn't make sense to a lot of people. Like a lot of people looked at it and said, okay, well, the Democrats are going to win Minnesota anyway. Like, why not choose, what's his name, Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania? He's a governor. At least he has a track record of doing things. He doesn't have as much baggage as Tim Walz. And for some reason, she chose somebody from a state the Democrats are going to win regardless of, if Donald Trump was running for president at the time or not. Like, Minnesota was a state where they were going to win. And so people were like, well, why don't you get somebody from a swing state, just in case the election doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. And, her choosing Tim Walz really surprised a lot of people. But now that I'm seeing what's going on and a lot of stuff that's happening in Minnesota and a lot of things that are being exposed, it all makes sense. I mean, these are two people that are basically, they wanted to use, and one person did use, these people from these foreign countries to vote so they can, keep power. That was basically it. I mean, if you look at what's happening with Tim Walz in Minnesota, yeah, don't tell me he didn't use, the Somalian population to sit up and, have political power to win elections and things like that. Because, why would those officials look the other way? Why would those politicians and business leaders look the other way? A lot of the times, these Democrats, they use the, immigrant populations in America to, have a voting bloc. And even when Donald Trump, I remember when Donald Trump was talking about this, everybody was looking and looking at him like he was strange and he was some weirdo. But no, he's correct. I mean, if you look at some of these states, then you go back to the 2020 election, a lot of these states were close. I mean, these were states where Donald Trump was doing very well in. These were states that supported Donald Trump, this time around. And so, a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes with Democrats. And I would say Republicans too, but I'm going to focus on the Democrats. A lot of stuff went on with the Biden administration, with Tim Walz. And, people can say what they want, but Kamala Harris chose somebody at the time that, fit the mold. And if they were elected, listen, immigrants would be pouring across the border like no tomorrow. And so, again, I'm not saying Donald Trump is perfect, some perfect angel, but as far as immigration, I'm happy that Donald Trump is cracking down on a lot of these illegal immigrants that are coming into the United States, because Tim Walz and Kamala Harris would have let probably another 10, 20 million come across the border. Can you think about if they were in power right now, if she was the president and Tim Walz was the vice president, could you imagine after 4 years how many illegal immigrants would be in America, getting benefits, getting all sorts of stuff? So, I'm happy that the American people said, you know what, not this time. We're not allowing the Democrats to, do the okey doke to us. And so, with them, the border would be wide open. Like, basically, the border would be so wide open to the point where it's just like folks would look at the American border as a joke. And in the past, they did. I mean, remember when you saw images of illegal immigrants that were just crossing the border to get to America, and they weren't even thinking about consequences. They were like, we're going to bring the whole family. And so Donald Trump, Democrats can say all they want, but he cracked down on that and he stopped a lot of that madness. And so I'm with Donald Trump when it comes to mass deportations, because we can't allow folks to stay in America that don't have the proper paperwork. You can't go to their country and, just stay there as long as you want. Like if you said, you know what, I'm going to go to China, or I'm going to go to one of these other countries that always lectures America about immigration, they wouldn't let you stay. And so why are we going to allow folks that don't have the proper paperwork to stay in America? And we have a news media in America that on some of these channels, they sit up and they'll show a story, but it's a story so people gain or have sympathy or start to have sympathy for an illegal immigrant, which is crazy. Like they'll show, oh, well, this person has been in the country for 60 years. Still, A, you're breaking the law because you're not supposed to be in America. You don't have the proper paperwork. And then B, guess what? In that time, why didn't some of those folks get their paperwork straight? So, the media keeps on always, trying to make it like, oh, these mean Republicans are trying to deport hardworking folks and all this other mess. But it's just like a lot of those folks are costing Americans. I mean, some of those people are the reason why you can't get certain services, or when you go to the hospital and they tell you, oh, well, you know what? You have to, wait outside or wait here until we get a room. And so, no, I'm for mass deportations. And whether you agree with Trump on things or not, guess what? Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, oh, it would have been a mess right now. Could you imagine this mess being uncovered? And Tim Walz is, let's say, the vice president of America. I mean, he would have probably sat up and said, you know what, we're going to try to ban Rumble or something like that. Like, I can only imagine the type of social media laws they would pass so this scandal and the details about this fraud and corruption don't come out if he were the vice president. And so, America really, in my opinion, did a great job in seeing through Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, because with him being vice president and this stuff coming out, this would have been a huge disaster. And I can only imagine the type of stuff they would have done to cover up the situation, because now this person would be a vice president. Could you imagine? He'd probably be telling Kamala Harris, you know what, we need to ban Twitter, we need to ban Rumble. Like, that would probably be what they're trying to do, because a lot of those media outlets, they or not my bad, not media outlets. A lot of those social media platforms are where a lot of this information is coming out on. So again, if it weren't for social media, you wouldn't hear about some of this stuff. I mean, Fox News reported on it in the past, but social media is making people like Nick Shirley go viral. Social media is really, to me, in my opinion, like the only place right now where you can get real news in America. Sad to say, but social media is the reason why this stuff is being exposed. And I hope that more folks on social media say to themselves, you know what, we don't need mainstream media to report on stories about immigration. We're going to sit up and tell our story. You don't realize the power that you have with a simple cell phone or a microphone. I mean, or even if you start your own podcast, like just people speaking out and being concerned citizens, as they say, can change the world. And so it took, even though this story's been talked about, because there have been people to come out and talk about, what's going on in Minnesota, but it took Nick Shirley to make it go viral. And so you got to remember, at that time, I think Fox News did a report in 2013 or something like that. But I mean, now with X, and you got Elon Musk as the owner, he's more of a free speech guy. Now, a lot of this stuff that was censored and, sort of kept away from everybody, now this stuff is going viral, and I'm happy about it because it's really exposing a lot of the corruption that's going on behind the scenes. And so in the comments section, let me know how you feel about Tim Walz. And, like I said, now that I'm connecting the dots, I see why Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz. Both of them are, basically for a bunch of foreigners coming to America and getting benefits. Like, that's their thing. They look at these folks as a voting bloc, like a way to stay in power for the next how many years they can stay in power. So again, let me know how you feel about Tim Walz and this whole corruption scandal in Minnesota. Thank you.